Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this video and talk about this topic that I thought would be very particularly interesting. I kept seeing this conversation, of course, about the most recent subject within that of the 135-pound weight division. And of course, for those of you that remember the latest, biggest fight of the lightweight division, we know that there was a very great fight between that of Vasily Lomachenko and Devin Haney. A lot of people thought that, of course, it was a quote unquote controversial decision. I'm not going to say that it was super controversial in my view because I thought it was a fight that could have went either way. Would I have probably said that Lomachenko landed the more impactful punches on average throughout the fight? Probably, but it was a very close fight. But either way, neither here nor there. Devin Haney, of course, who is still the currently undisputed champion in that of the lightweight division. There is a possibility for some very big fights later on down the line. Who knows? Maybe he could rematch that of Vasily Lomachenko. I don't personally see it happening. I think the main fight that Devin Haney more than likely wants is that of Gervonta Tank Davis. But Gervonta Tank Davis, for whatever reason, like regular, seems usually to be on the back pedal in terms of taking some of those really big A-grade fights. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. But one of the fighters, of course, that has been talking a lot about potentially facing that of Devin Haney has been that of Mr. Shakur Stevenson, who, of course, was the former somewhat undisputed fighter at the 130-pound weight division, still might be. I'm not quite sure if he gave up his belts yet or not. But Devin Haney, of course, recently apparently gave him an offer. And Devin Haney apparently offered Shakur Stevenson a 25% of the purse, which, of course, in my view, is probably not going to work. But this is a very interesting debate because both Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson here, I think, could debatably have a point with their argument. So we're going to talk about this here. And of course, there's a lot of the Devin Haney fan base alleging that Shakur Stevenson avoided that of Devin Haney. And I somewhat get their perspective, but I also get that of Shakur Stevenson's perspective as well. So we're going to talk about it. Let's see what Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation had to say.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So Shakur Stevenson is stating that Devin Haney offered him a 75-25 split to fight next, but he rejected it. He said, I don't think I'm the A side. I just know my worth and 25% ain't it. I didn't turn the fight down. That was supposedly the first offer. Haven't heard nothing since. You see, but what I don't understand is if Shakur Stevenson received an offer, he received a 25% offer, why wouldn't Shakur Stevenson come back with a counter and tell them the number that he actually wants? You go low, I go high. It's called negotiating. We all know for a fact Devin Haney would definitely give Shakur Stevenson more than what the purse split is. That's a guarantee. Honestly,
I'm not quite sure if that's a guarantee. And I would have to see maybe with a little bit of negotiating or maybe see where this goes a little bit later on down the line. And I'm not maybe saying that maybe Shakur Stevenson didn't kind of maybe talk himself into a hole and maybe now he's backing out of it. But is it also possible that maybe this is Devin Haney's way of pricing himself out? And certain people may disagree and they may say, well, that's not fair. Devin Haney, he ended up accepting, 22 or 20% both times against that of George Kambosos. And he had to go in George Kambosos' backyard in Australia. So if Shakur Stevenson is allegedly that great, and if he's going to beat Devin Haney like he claimed, why can't he accept that type of purse bid? And I understand, that perspective. But if we're also going to be real about the George Kambosos fight really quickly, George Kambosos pretty much was a fighter that was a ripe tomato in a garden that was pretty much ready for the plucking at any moment in time. And basically what I mean by that is that any relatively A-grade fighter within that weight division, they were going to beat George Kambosos. George Kambosos was one of those fighters that he ended up getting the belt because he defeated a fighter that was very, very good in that of Teofimo Lopez when he pretty much had an off night, when he was not fighting the most intelligent fight. And on top of that, George Kambosos was already a very tough style for Teofimo Lopez because they have a lot of similarities. And I also think that Teofimo, that he was a little bit mentally unstable, and I think that that resembled in his fight that night, just in my personal view. So a lot of people can say, well, Devin Haney ended up taking it, right? But it's a completely different avenue when you're talking about a fight like this. Because both Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney know, and for those of us that know boxing, we all know that this would be a true 50-50 level fight. no one ever truly thought that George Kambosos was ever actually going to defeat any real A-grade fighter on their best night within that weight division. It just is what it is. So accepting a 22% purse against a fighter that more than likely is probably not in your same league, against a fighter overall that is probably one of the better talents in all of boxing, is a completely different situation.
This is the same thing that Jose.
And once again, I'm not saying that maybe Devin Haney, that he would not give him more in the negotiations, but I just don't see Shakur Stevenson accepting 25%. I'm not even quite sure if Shakur Stevenson would accept 30%. Now, some people may say, well, 30% would be fair. And I will say this, Shakur Stevenson, in my view, if he does truly want this fight to happen as badly as what he claims, he may have to accept a 30 to 35% per split, at the max 40. He probably is not going to be the A grade in this fight. Devin Haney is the completely undisputed champion there. Whatever he is going to say is what's going to happen. He is mainly going to dictate terms. But once again, I do have to wonder if this is Devin Haney's way of almost somewhat pricing himself out.
Ramirez and Teofimo Lopez did when they became Regis Prograis mandatory. When they were supposed to negotiate that fight, both of them said, we're not fighting him for that 75-25 split or 65-35 split. I forget which one it was. But they said, we're not going to fight for that. But once again...
Yes, and you all said that Jose Ramirez and Teofimo Lopez, that they were quote-unquote ducking and avoiding that Regis Prograis. So, it's going to be very interesting, Dante. Are you then going to allege that Shakur Stevenson is now avoiding that of Devin Haney, that he's a quote-unquote ducker? We all know that that's probably not going to happen because, once again, we all know that Dante, he has to promote Shakur Stevenson as one of the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters. And in my view, he is when it comes down to it. But one of the quote-unquote ways that you might be off Dante's list is if you quote-unquote are a ducker or an avoider. And we all know that he always criticizes certain fighters like Canelo or Lomachenko or Fury. Let's be real, fighters that don't have a melanin skin tone when it comes down to it. Let's be honest with ourselves, fighters who are not black American fighters. We all know that he criticizes all those fighters for allegedly avoiding and ducking. So very interesting. Is he going to call Shakur Stevenson a ducker? Highly doubtful.
Instead of saying they weren't going to fight, they could have actually negotiated a higher purse, but neither one of them did. They completely walked away from that fight without ever asking for any type of purse that they wanted to demand. A lot of times when a boxer becomes a mandatory, they start negotiating with the other party before the fight even reaches the purse bid. The purse bid is usually just a backup plan just in case both parties can't come to an agreement. But in this case,
that's certainly an excellent point that one could bring to the table. One could debate that maybe one or both sides were not as serious about this fight as maybe one was letting on. But like I said, I'm not really going to allege anything on either fighter at the moment, at least in completion, because once again, I don't really know much about the negotiations and not much was said.
You have one party that's not even negotiating. He's not asking for a certain amount, and that's Shakur Stevenson. You heard what he said. Shakur said that was supposedly the first offer. Haven't heard nothing since. So once again, why wouldn't Shakur Stevenson say, okay, you guys are offering 25%? Well, I want 40%. I want 50%. Or whatever it is you're asking for. Why wouldn't you give the purse and the percentage that you are requesting? Why wouldn't you tell people? For all my drones that's going to be sent out and you're going to be listening to this video, this is your opportunity to go to Twitter and ask Shakur Stevenson that question. What percentage are you looking for, champ? If you already told people that you were worth way more than 25%.
What percentage are you looking for, champ? No, he's avoiding Devin Haney. No, he's allegedly ducking. But when it comes to Canelo Alvarez or some of these other fighters, boy, all of a sudden, they're duckers and, they're not taking the biggest fights. Once again, the LDBC and new media, they have already shown what their true objective actually is.
Then you should tell people what type of percentage you want. And your reporters should be asking Shakur Stevenson the same questions. What percentage would you like in the Devin Haney split? Because if it's reasonable, and when I say reasonable, I mean we do have to remember, and Shakur has to remember, he has no belts. He's fighting against the undisputed champion. So if his demand is reasonable,
that is true. And that's why I understand Devin Haney's side a little bit. But Devin Haney also has to understand it's not like Shakur Stevenson is just this dude that has no star power behind him. And understandably, Devin Haney, of course, had a pay-per-view fight with that of Vasily Lomachenko, but it's not like those pay-per-view numbers were absolutely out of this world. In fact, I don't even know what the pay-per-view numbers were. I'm not even sure if it did over 300,000 pay-per-view buys. Maybe I'm wrong. So it's not like Devin Haney is a Canelo Alvarez or a Floyd Mayweather or a Manny Pacquiao or a Gervonta Tank Davis where he clearly brings in the money or he clearly brings in butts and seats. He just doesn't. And that's not me saying that he doesn't have a fan base or that he doesn't attract certain people, but at the end of the day, it's not like he's one of the megastars in boxing. I just don't see how Shakur Stevenson is going to take a 25% split. I think maybe Shakur would take a 30 to 35 or 40% split, anywhere within that range. I don't see him taking anything lower than the 30 for sure. And if Devin Haney repeatedly says that, oh, well, you're getting 25%, once again, I do have to question if that's Devin Haney's way of kind of pricing himself out. And certain people, once again, will say, well, that's not fair because he accepted his dues against George Kambosos. Right, but once again, it's a completely different matter when you accept a split against a fighter that more than likely is really not an A-grade level fighter or someone that clearly is not on your same level, and someone that is one of the bigger threats within your lower weight divisions.
I'm pretty sure the Haneys will.
Because against Vasily Lomachenko, do you think Devin Haney would have said, okay, I'll take 25%? Absolutely not.
Accept, because they really want to make this fight. So let's see what number Shakur Stevenson reveals. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this out, guys.
But once again, I just thought that I would talk about that. Very interesting. And it is going to be interesting to see how these negotiations go a little bit later on down the line. But once again, very interesting from Dante. No allegations of ducking by Shakur Stevenson. No allegations of avoidance, anything like that. But with Teofimo and Jose Ramirez, immediately, they were quote-unquote duckers. So anyway, that's pretty much about it for today. I just thought that I would talk about that. This is going to be very interesting. But as for Devin Haney's perspective, I think in my personal view, I think he does look at Shakur Stevenson as a threat in my personal view. I don't think Shakur Stevenson is going to take anything less than a 30 to 35% split, just my personal view of it. And he already said that he knows he's not the A side. Now, once again, people will say, well, George Kambosos, he did it against George, right? But when it comes to a big fight like this, and Shakur, I think he believes that he can beat Devin Haney, and I also believe that he's also the better fighter than Devin Haney. But at the end of the day, this is going to be the biggest fight of both of their careers. And on top of that, Devin Haney, he is going to be legitimately bigger than Shakur Stevenson, even though Shakur is only moving up one weight class. But like I've always said, moving up just one weight class, in my view, when I think that you're around the same dimensions of that weight class, and Shakur is at least a natural 130-pounder, if not natural 135-pounder. Devin Haney, of course, in my view, is a natural 140-pounder, but it shouldn't be that tough if Shakur is as good as what he claims himself to be. Because Shakur probably is around a natural 135-pounder. But we'll see. But anyways, very interesting. Just thought that I would talk about that. Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.